One. Shalom, everybody. March the 10th, 2024, Parshat Pekudei. This week, we are ending the book of Shemot. It's always emotional for us to end the book, and that it's emotional because it segments the year and segments our lives. We reach the end of the book of Shemot, and it's coalescing with the calendar in a way now because we have entered officially the pre-Passover zone with the first of the special Parshiot Shkalim, which was last week. We won't have Parshat Zachor till next week, which is the pre-Purim Parsha. Say that 4 times, okay? And then from there,
today is the 11th.
And it's today the 11th or the 10th?
11th.
Why is my thing on the whatever? Okay.
Because it didn't change.
How about that? Anyway, we are going to do the end of the book now. Here we go. So, presenting the shared screen with the end of the book. So, what happens at the end? Just to kind of digest 3 or so chapters. Moses, they collect everything, they build it, they do an accounting. The accounting at the beginning of this parsha is actually very fascinating in terms of, what the quantities of the materials are, and we've studied that in the past, trying to make a dollar estimate of what the Mishkan cost. And then we have a series of paragraphs basically telling us Moses did this, he built this, he did this, he did this, and I think, and I just leafed back at last year's classes. There's a musical quality to this. There's a song to this. I think rather than see the end of the book of Shemot as a kind of boring recapitulation of they commanded and then they did it. I don't think so at all. I think it's exuberant. I think it's a real symphony of completion, and it's really telling us it's reaching a climactic moment where the Mishkan is completed. It's ready. You get the sense everything is ready to go. Everything is put together. It's all in the Vayihi HaMishkan Echad. The thing is put together. It's all assembled. And it's a remarkable feeling. And we've talked about that in the best. The remarkable feeling of having completed a project and the blessing that Moses gives to the people afterwards and all of that. I think that we short shrift this by saying, it's filled with details. It's really filled with exuberance. So I want to look at the last few psukim and then focus here. And I know, we put everything under a real microscope here. And of course, we can go in a lot of different directions. We can go in midrash, we can go in commentary, we can go in, in unusual directions. But I always go at this, the direction of the text. What is it saying? What is it not saying? And importantly, how is it saying it? Okay. And what methodology, what kind of language is it using? Why is it choosing one word over another word? This is the strategy for studying the Torah. We really have to approach it not in terms of, it's saying this and therefore it means this, but it uses diction and uses forms that are interesting, that need to be analyzed in terms of where other usages of words and other forms appear, and from there you can arrive at some kind of interpretations, and even I think even tell a story, and that's what has motivated a lot of my curiosity here. Okay, so this last thing in English here, he set up the enclosure around the tabernacle and the altar, and he put up the screen for the gate of the enclosure. Okay, so if you have the picture of a Mishkan, I'll show you one in a second. It's a kind of enclosed area, enclosed by fabrics and other kinds of material, posts and railings, and it's a whole oblong rectangular camp, basically, with very set dimensions. And inside there's a structure which is an oblong rectangular structure, also covered and enclosed by certain layers of cloth and skins, or cloth basically, or ornamented cloths, ornamented skins. And then we have this verse, Vayichal Moshe et hamlacha, and we're not going to go in this direction in this class, but it's a useful direction to go. Vayichal Moshe et hamlacha. When he finished the work, of course, if you recite the Kiddush every Friday night, you will get the same word, right? It's Elohim. God finished, right? God finished all the work. Uh, and again, our argument is that the choice of words here is not accidental and not coincidental. It's deliberate. That there is the choice here in the narrator, that saying the construction of the tabernacle is a way of mirroring the construction of the world, the universe. And it's astounding. It's an astounding theological claim, right? That God creates an entire, vast, immeasurable, infinite universe, and that we create a very finite space, that God dwells in the universe, and that God dwells in the space. I make this point all the time while reciting the 150th Psalm and trying to interpret Hallelu el b'kodsho, Hallelu birkia uzo, that those two first lines in the 150th Psalm really indicate this kind of parallel, which is praise God in his Kodesh, in his intimate space, praise God within the vastness of the universe of his strength, the Rakia Uzo, which is the heavenly heavens. Okay, so the biblical imagination really has this kind of, I don't want to say duality, but it's really a kind of back and forth, where we're in intimate space and we're in the universe. And this is life, basically, right? We live our lives in the privacy, intimacy of our lives, and in the intimacy of our family bonds, but we also live in a wider space, in a public space. God is in the private space of the intimate connection with human beings. And here the Bible, of course, and Judaism presents the intimate kind of relationship with the Jewish people, and God is related to the whole world. Go ahead, Nanette.
So I really like this because if we read the parsha, if we read the parshas, and it says that God is in our lives, God is in our spaces every day or in every relationship.
Right.
This indicates that God, has this big universe, but yet he made sure that we should make this little tablet, this little cozy nook, that we should be here. But the fact that the cloud is on top of it indicates to me that God has his hands on us.
Well, let's hold that thought, because we're going to go there. Okay. And so this is we again, yeah, I think it's a good way to encapsulate what we're saying, is that at the core of the Bible's story, and the core of the biblical view, the presentation that the Bible is making about the world, there are these different arenas of the relationship, which is the world, the universe, and the intimate, connection, personal, individual, familial, or peoplehood. And these are reflected in the structures, that is the universe, and then in, of course, the Mishkan or temple. I have not had the experience of visiting the Grand Canyon, although many people I'm sure here have. And, but anybody who's had an appreciation of nature, whether it's on a hike or a mountain, whatever, you do get a sense of grandeur, right? That is part of the human experience, and the spiritual response to grandeur is awe. So God can speak to us in the grandeur of the universe, right? All you need to do is look at, through the telescope, and you'll see the grandeur of the universe. So God does speak to us in that kind of demonstration. But as the late Rabbi Simon Greenberg wrote, and I quote him often in this, and it's a beautiful thing that he says. He says personally in his own religious life, he says, God did speak to me through nature and through the wonders of the world, but God spoke to me more deeply in when I was able to witness, or when I saw human kindness. That is to say, when people sacrificed, their well-being for the benefit of others, or were inspired, let's say, to do an act of kindness that from which they would get no reward. And and he had to ask the question, which I think we all ask: why would someone do that? And his answer was a religious answer, because there was, there's godliness in that sacred act, basically. And again, a theology here that's presented is a theology of God in the universe and God in an intimate space, and that's the connection of those two words, Vayichal and Vayichal. Let me continue, and we'll go into our theme there. So, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of God filled the tabernacle. So, we've talked about it in the past, but I want to kind of, this is the davening line, the line that I want to meditate on. Okay. And take a bottle of wine, pour yourself a glass, sip the wine, close your eyes, and inhale, and let's elevate to imagining this moment. So the cloud, the cloud covers the tent of meeting, and God's presence fills the tabernacle. Very mysterious moment. But that's the moment that everything is finished. And then it says, Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of God filled the tabernacle. So we get this sense that the cloud is just so thick that he can't go in there. He can't go in there because A, he can't see, and B, possibly he wouldn't be able to breathe in there. Okay. And theologically, there's no room for him. That is to say, God is there. The God has filled I'm being very careful here. God's presence has filled this. Okay. And I'm being careful for a reason that will become evident in a moment. Okay. So Moses can't go in there. Ki shachan alav ha'anan, because the cloud is in there. Uchvod Adonai maleh et hamishkan, and God's presence fills the tabernacle. So I'm going to, leave for unanswerableness right now whether he is not able to go in because he can't breathe, okay, which makes a lot of sense to me, or he can't go in because or he can't see, which makes an awful lot of sense, or because God's presence fills, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. It could mean that it's too much, so he has to stay outside. Okay. And then we get this coda. When the cloud lifts from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, the cloud of God rested by day, while the fire would appear in that cloud by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. And this is where we say, Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazek. כי ענן אדוני על המשכן יומם, באש תהיה לילה בו לעיני כל בית ישראל בכל מעשיהם. And so the picture that you get is a fire cloud picture. It's very difficult to imagine what this kind of looks like. And it's there, and it symbolizes God's presence. Susie, go ahead. I'm stopping share.
Yeah, I just noticed this for the first time. So I hear an echo of the end of Dvarim.
Yes.
All Yisrael.
There definitely is an echo. I mean, the beginnings and ends of books are not accidental things. There's a lot of deliberate connections here. You know, a good class would be compare all the ways that the books end. You know, Breshit ends with Joseph in a box. Shmot ends here with the cloud and the readiness for the journey. Vayikra ends with these are the words that Moses spoke at Mount Sinai, or God said to Moses at Mount Sinai. But Midbar ends with the people in the desert, and Devarim ends Leinei Kol Yisrael, before all of Israel, as they are ready to go into the land. And all of these endings reflect a certain kind of, their literary tension for sure. There's dramatic tension. The Torah, it works. It works as a book. It works. It's hard. It demands a lot from us to kind of understand and to put together. But in the end, the narrative works as a narrative. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Marlene.
Does this mean that the Jews in general could understand the presence of God and not just Moshe? Because if Moshe couldn't go in, then it was he who had the interaction. And here is Moshvotechem and all of their journeys, because they could all see the cloud or the fire.
So I think you're right. I think the cloud fire is visible to the people, okay, and that makes them understand that something is present with them.
It's not just Google Maps.
That's correct. That they are being directed. That when the cloud fire goes up, they go. When it comes down, they settle. But I think there's a bit of sleight of hand here. I hate to say this, but in reading this very, 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 very closely, you get the idea that the pillar fire cloud is similar but different from the cloud, okay? And I'm going to make that case that they're related and that they're similar, but that there's a story beneath this story here, okay? I'm gonna keep that in suspense till I reveal it. Okay, here we go.
When the cloud goes up, you'll tell us.
Well, that's basically what I'm going to do here. Okay, so I've been playing with the AI program, artificial intelligence. The program is called Crayon, Craiyon. What a pun! Aiyon, and it's a program that if you type in a certain thing, you say it'll generate pictures for you. I'm not a big fan because you can see the artificiality in it, but it generated this for me. Okay. I enlarged the cloud, right? This is a big cloud. I wrote a cloud, draw me a cloud covering a structure. And so what's interesting here is that it's an image and it's a cloud. And at first I had to take the background away. It was on a black background. And whatever. Okay, so it's a cloud, and you can look up in the sky and on a day like today probably see something similar. Cumulus clouds. There's, people who study these things. There are all sorts of nimbus, cumulus, cirrus, etc. That's, in seventh grade science, you can learn the different names of different kinds of clouds. But my point here is that it's a thickness that is impenetrable, or it's scary, or it's too much God, or it's smoky, right? And then this, I don't want to say the cynic in me, but I have no other way of saying this. The cynic in me is basically saying, okay, well, how did they do that, right? And if anybody's been in theater, I'm going to stop the share for a second. You know that smoke can be generated in numerous ways on a stage. I used to do this at my Seder, where I would go out before Pesach and buy dry ice, and I'd keep it in a chest, and I would pull it out, at the Seder, and then I would, without anybody seeing, I'd plop it in a pitcher of water. And when you put dry ice in a pitcher of water, it bubbles up and it makes some smoke. And it's very, very fun, and it's interesting. And it that can really capture a child's imagination, that you have a smoking table, right? Dry ice does that for you. And theater has lots of different ways of generating smoke. So I'm not saying that this is theatrical, but I will say that, if you burn a lot of sacrifices, you're going to get a lot of smoke. And I'm also going to say that part of, what is happening in the biblical imagination is a set of circumstances in which nature conforms to God's will. Nature will do what God wants to do. I think that that's one of the great themes of the Bible, that nature doesn't do anything on its own. Nature is subservient to God. So when the people, and we'll see this in a second, when the people get to the mountain at Mount Sinai, which is the parallel moment where a cloud appears, the mountain is on fire. Well, you don't have to be a geologist to know that mountains go on fire on certain circumstances. A mountain will erupt, at the right moment under the right, geological circumstance. I mean, if you're there, it's the wrong geological circumstance. You don't want to be there, okay? But a mountain will erupt and smoke and churn out smoke the way a furnace churns out smoke. You should see, a kiln choke, pump out its smoke. It's really quite dramatic. So this is what happens, when the mountain is smoky. So, and I'm recalling the late Herbert Rand, who mentioned when, a couple of weeks ago we were reading about Elijah. Elijah has this moment where he's facing off the prophets of Baal, and he's able to do all sorts of tricks, basically, to get his sacrifices ignited and lit on fire, and for the sacrifices of Baal not to be lit. And you do wonder, what kind of role people had out, off stage here. I'm saying that cynically, without saying it cynically, that there's the mystical imagination is saying, well, of course, everything's happening here the way it's described, that there's a cloud covers it, and why not? I mean, all sorts of miraculous things happen. This is certainly one of them, that a cloud comes down at the right time, at the right moment, when the thing is finished. This just adds to the great drama, and the people that are in the audience watching this are going to be completely wowed by this. And that's the whole point. The whole point is that you see this and you are overwhelmed with awe for God, for bringing God's presence into the realm of humanity. That's what's going on here. Okay.
Rabbi.
Yes, go ahead.
I may have read this in Torah.com. I'm not sure where it was. Somebody said this is how you get water to ignite, and it was a some kind of chemical that you add to water, and you could get.
Sure, right. So there's all sorts of tricks. Chemists, have all sorts of tricks that they do. I mean, the whole, if you watched Breaking Bad, any the early episodes of Breaking Bad, when they were introducing the character, Mr. White, I guess, the chemistry teacher, and he was able to do all sorts of things to uh, galvanize people's attention and crime, basically explosions. Chemists know how to do that. Okay, let's go on. Here we go. So you have a big cloud here, and we're going to read it closely. Vayichas he'anan. What does it mean? Okay, so the first thing we do to look to figure out what a word is look it up. Vayichas is to cover, and I pulled these out of this is off of the dictionary, which is located on Sefaria.org, the online source of every single text that is Jewish, including dictionaries. This is a Klein dictionary. You can see that I know this is this is tedious, but I enjoy it in the sense that it's grammar and these grammatical forms teach us things. Kasa, he covered. Nichsa was covered. Kisa, he covered. Kusa was covered. Hitkasa covered himself. Okay. Kasui, covered. Kisui, a covering. Kisui, also a covering. Michse, well, number, but it's cover and covering. Michase. So you get the word yichas, the root is kaf samech hey, and then from that you build all the different nouns and verbs that have to do with covering. And I could ask you to if you recall any time in the Torah where there is a covering or other coverings. What if anything come to mind? All right. So yes, go ahead, Ruth.
Well, you missed last week's Parsha. We have Egel Masecha. I mean, that's
Nice.
just last week's
Okay.
Parsha.
But Masecha is Samech Chaf, or mask. Is it from the same root, Susie?
It comes from the same root. I never understood.
Okay, so it's a covering. Masach, is a covering. Okay.
And by the way, your cloud looks like mashed potatoes to me.
Exactly. Okay. That's why we could also, we could say AI is not yet up there. Okay. It may have to do with the person putting in the instructions. At any rate,
למסוך,
limsoch,
אוהל,
or
I can see
also
you.
related. We have a lot of echo here. Who's echoing? Okay, the Parkovs. Yes.
That's the such that's from.
So different. It's a different. Yeah. Okay. Our point is that if we go all the way here, we'll get a lot of different understandings of it. And it's used here. Okay. So the question then, we have a dictionary. The dictionary gives us all the different layers of meaning here. But where else does this occur in the Torah? And for that we have a concordance, but I'll save you from the tools and give you just the results. We read the verse again. I'm sorry. Well, before we get to other uses, I want to take you into the poetics of this verse, because this is really important. I think the poetics give us the hint of the story. Okay, so in Hebrew, you could make a sentence with a subject followed by a verb, or you could make a sentence with a verb followed by a subject. Vayichas he'anan et ohel moed. So that literally means covered the cloud, the tent of meeting. Uchvod Adonai maleh et hamishkan. God's presence filled the sanctuary. So if again, with the glass of wine and meditation and shuckling in your chair, you daven this, you daven and you look at it, you meditate on it, you go like, what's going on here? Well, if you have read a single line of any psalm, ashrei, or any prayer, and you've heard this from me before about parallelism, that Hebrew poetry and a great chunk of the Hebrew Bible has at its core a method of relating sentences in which the first part of a sentence is a statement, and the second part of the statement is the intensifying of the statement, okay? So, for example, Bechol Yom Avarcheka, every day I will praise him, and I will praise him forever, okay? And those, part A, every day I will praise him forever. Well, it sounds a lot the same, but there's something different about that. In that the second part of that verse kind of hammers home the first part. It's a intensification. There are various forms of this, lots of different categories of this, but the basic understanding of how biblical parallelism works is that I state something and then I state it again stronger. And even in the way I talk, I'm using parallelism. And so, in a way, it's a very human form of speaking in which I raise tension in a first part of a sentence, and there you are with me in this tension, and I satisfy tension in the second part of a sentence. And I think that form of speaking is just embedded in the Hebrew language, and that embedding in the Hebrew language shapes the Hebrew mind, such that we're always looking for the answer. We're always looking for the echo. We're always looking for the repeated phrase. Ledor vador, generation to generation, leolam, forever, right? And I've said this, Yimloch Adonai leolam, may God reign forever. Ledor vador, hallelujah. May his, be praised from generation to generation. And my little sermon on that is Jews tell time in two different realms. One realm is universal, eternal time, and the other realm is generational time. I look at time in terms of my children, my children's children, my parents, my grandparents, etc. I'm located within a chain of generations, but I'm also located in eternity. And that's very rich. That's a very beautiful way of understanding time. So here we have a parallelistic phrase. And I'm saying, okay, so if my presumption is that the choice that the Bible makes in terms of the usage of words and the shape or form of the usage of words is deliberate, then what is it saying here? Well, it's giving us a double phrase. So it's in English, it's very awkward to say covered the cloud, the tent of meeting, covered the cloud, the tent of meeting. That's poetic. It's, a high English type of thing, but we don't talk that way. We would say the cloud covered the tent and God's presence filled the sanctuary. But in Hebrew, it's verb, noun, object, noun, verb, object. And the verb, noun, verb, that has a unique term for it. It's called chiasmus, which is A, B, B, A. And that, I think, also gives you a certain richness to the poetic understanding of it. And also cues you consciously, and I think subconsciously, to interact with this text in the way that it wants you to, which is to say that there are two things happening here. And the second thing completes the first thing. And the first thing that happens is that there's a cloud. And the second thing that happens is that there's the presence of God. Now, I'm reading this in a hyper-literal way, where I'm saying that there are two distinct things happening, and that the second completes the first, right? That a cloud comes down and covers the Ohel Moed, and the God's presence fills the sanctuary. And I think that it's just not a repetition, but there's a drama there. The drama there is that there's an intimate experience of intensity, and there's also a more rarefied experience of mysticism or something beyond that. And I'll try and I have this here, as I said, why is it important? It's poetry, parallelism. Filling completes, maleh, the word maleh is to fill, completes the act of covering. God's kavod is located in the cloud, and that the tent and the Mishkan are related. I know it's complicated. Mishkan is a general term, oh, the specific term, and here's my illustration. Okay, so this whole precinct is the Mishkan, and here the Mishkan also gets identified as the Ohel Moed, but I'm saying here that this is probably wanting me to read it, that the Ohel Moed is the intense place of connection that takes place within the whole area, okay? And so the Ohel Moed is this part, and the Mishkan is the whole part, okay? And these terms are transferable, so you can't be held to it. But if I'm being very, very hyper microscopic in the reading, I'm saying that there's a drama going on. I'll go back to the verse again. The drama here is that God's intensity is in over the Holy of Holies, and God's presence is in the precinct of the whole thing. And that God filling the presence with God's kavod, which I'm calling God's presence, kvod Hashem, what would you call it? It's hard to translate, the glory of God, and whatever that means, okay? It's that fills the space, okay? So Mishkan, it's all impenetrable. Moses can't go in it, okay? But it also says that there's something here that's complete. I read this from a literary perspective. The texture of the text is saying this is a moment unlike any other moment, where all the pieces are together, and God's cloud and God's presence, it's all together. But it also makes it impenetrable. Okay? Now, this is the picture of this. And the picture is useful because it's somebody's imagination. Love the fact that there's animals, in this picture outside of the Mishkan. The poor animals, they're all kind of being tended by shepherds, because you can see the big animals and the little animals, and they're all going to get turned into the smoke, and it just doesn't seem to bother anybody. It bothers us, but it didn't bother anybody back then. Okay, what's the story? The covering and the filling. And then I'm going to ask, where else do we have a Vayechas? Where else do we have a Vayechas? Well, the usual suspects, we're going to go back to Exodus 19 and see if, I'm going to ask the question, do we get a cloud in Exodus 19? Exodus 19 is the moment before the utterance of the 10 utterances, okay? So I have the whole text here. I'm going to zip through this. The third month after the going out of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, on that day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. They moved on from the Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, camped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped opposite the mountain. Then Moshe went up to God, and God called out to him from the mountain, saying, Kamar, thus you say, the house of Yaakov, tell the children of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. So now if you hearken to my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my special treasure from among the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, holy nations. These are the words that you are to speak to the children of Israel. Moshe came and had the elders of the people called, and he said before them these words, and which God had commanded him, and all the people answered, and they said, all that God has spoken, we will do. Kol asher diber Adonai naaseh. Only naaseh here. Moshe reported the words of the people to God. God said to Moses, boom, Hine anochi ba elecha be'av ha'anan. I'm coming to you in a thick cloud. Okay, so this is God coming in a cloud. So the cloud then is a medium for God. Is God the cloud or God in the cloud? So in my microscopic reading of this, God is in the cloud, but God is not the cloud. God is Anochi ba elecha bi. I'm coming to you in of Heanan, in the thickness of a cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you and may hear and may have trust in you forever. Moshe told the words of the people to God. God said to Moses, go to the people, make them all today. Third day, God will come down before the eyes of people upon Mount Sinai. So wait a second. Ki bayom hazeh yered Adonai le'nei kol ha'am el har Sinai. It doesn't say that it's a cloud. It says God. There's no cloud there. Interesting. Fix the boundaries for other people around, saying take you care against going in the mountain or against touching its border. Whoever touches the mountain, that. Whether it beast or man, when the sound of the ram's horn is drawn out, they may go up to the mountain. Moshe went down from the mountain to the people. He made the people holy, scrubbed their clothes. Now it was on the third day, when it was daybreak. There were thunder sounds and lightning. V'anan kaved alahar. There's a heavy cloud, not avanan, anan kaved. But is God in that cloud? I don't know yet. We don't know. Read it closely. There's no, I'm touching my screen here. I can't see God's name here, right? It's just a cloud, kol shofar, and a sound. Moses goes down. It's so complicated, this thing. The people are scared. They station themselves between the mountain, Mount Sun, and they hear, okay, wait a second. I didn't bold this, but now Mount Sinai emitted smoke. The word for smoke is different from cloud. V'yarad alav Adonai ba'esh vayal ashano ke'eshen akivshan. Emitted smoke all over, since God had come down upon it in fire. Its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace. So wait a second. You have a cloud coming down. You have smoke and fire coming out. It's like a volcano erupting and a cloud coming down. Okay. And the people trembled, and the mountain trembled. I'm sorry. The shofar sound was exceeding strong. Moses kept speaking. And then, boom. Vayered Adonai al har Sinai. Okay. And now I'm saying this, I get a chill down my spine here. Because I ask you the question here, is there a cloud here? Yes or no? And the answer is no. There's no cloud here. There's
It
just
was there before. It doesn't say that it went away.
it didn't. There's no cloud. It doesn't say go away. It didn't. You're right. It doesn't say that it went away, but it tells you. I'm waving my finger here that God is not the cloud.
Right. That God is not the cloud, but God comes down into the cloud.
God comes into the cloud, or God comes down, and it's only God there. Okay. That is to say that this is not a cloud, God coming in the cloud. It's just God. Okay. The text doesn't say God comes in the cloud. The text just says, Vayered Adonai. Okay. And what I'm saying here from a theological perspective is that this is it, folks. We can only have one moment, one founding moment, and this is the founding moment. The founding moment is where God comes down. There's no other moment like this, okay? No other moment in entire scripture where it's only God without any kind of artifice or any kind of thing. And the whole system has to work that way, okay? I'll go on. Vayikra Adonai the Moshe, Rosh Ahar, Moses called Moses to the mountain. Vayomer Moshe, and Moses, he says to Moses, God said to Moses, go down, warn the people that they break through to God. Okay? And Moses said to God that people are not to be able to. So it's very confusing here, because God comes down and he's afraid that the people are going to kind of crash through the mountain, and he has to keep the mountain holy and keep them protected. All right. Moses went down to the people and said to them, and then you get the 10 Commandments. So the bonus for the close reader is that God himself comes down to the mountain. A cloud of God is elsewhere. Okay. All right, I'm going to go on for this. The covenant ceremony it happens after this, where they read the whole words of the covenant, and Moses took the record of the covenant, read it in the people hearing, and they said, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do it, we will hearken. And then you get blood. Moses took the blood, tossed it on the people. Here's the blood of the covenant. Right? Then went Moses up, and Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, the 70 elders, they saw the God of Israel beneath his feet, something like the work of some mystical here experience. And the pillars of the children of Israel did not send forth his hand. They beheld the God. Go up to me on the mountain and remain there, that I give you tablets of stone, the instruction, the command, which I've written down to instruct them. Moshe arose, went up to the mountain. The elders, he said, stay here for us until I return to you. Moses went up, Vaya Moshe el Hahar, Vayichas Hanan et Hahar. And the cloud came down over the mountain, meaning that is God in the cloud, or is it just a cloud? Or what's happening here? So what's happening here is Moses goes up and a cloud comes down, and then it says, Vayishkon kvod Adonai al har Sinai, not Vayimaleh, not its fills, but its dwelling, and it's the kavod Adonai. It's the presence of God. It's not God, but it's something that is present. Okay? Vayichaseu Anon, the cloud covers him for 6 days, and calls to Moses, Mitoch Hanan. Umare kvod Adonai, and God's presence looks like a consuming fire. Moses, Vayavo Moshe betoch Hanan, he goes into the cloud. Vayal elahar, goes up the mountain, and he stays there for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, so here again, God already came down, right, without a cloud. That was a few chapters before, but now there's a cloud, and Moses goes into the cloud, and then there's an encounter there, okay? And that's what happens there. This is similar. Now, in chapter 34, after the golden calf, where God says to Moses, after the whole debacle, you got to go up, you got to be with me. Moses carves 2 tablets. Vayired Adonai be'anan. God comes down in a cloud. All right? This is not Vayired Adonai. This is Vayired Adonai be'anan. God in a cloud. Meaning, this time is different. The first time is over. There's never going to be another first time. This is a redo, a repeat. And the repeat, by very definition of a repeat, is never going to be the first. Ilana, go ahead. I'm going to stop here because I want to see everybody.
If Adonai is not Be'anan, then what is he?
It's exactly the question. Okay. I think a very close reading of this text has to bring us to that question, which is God, of course, exists, but the imagination is limited in how a human imagination is limited in how it can perceive God. God is beyond all things imaginable. The cloud is perceptible, but God is not perceptible. So to say that God is in the cloud is a sentence that, again, you have to, I mean, I don't want to sound silly here, but it's a mystical statement. It's a thing that you know, it's not that you need to take a drug to perceive. It's a thing, it's a way of trying to express what is beyond expression. God cannot be contained here. And that the story that we're trying to tell in these terms is, this is a unique experience. This is an irreplaceable and unduplicatable, right? Or you cannot duplicate this moment. You can come close, you can try. And my punchline is, the Mishkan is an attempt to duplicate the experience, but the very language that the Torah uses to describe how the cloud of God comes down and fills the space already indicates to you that this is not the same. This is a close relative, a close similarity to the Sinai experience, but it is not the same as the Sinai experience. Okay? That's what it is.
I think it's because Bnei Israel did not have enough belief in Hashem, and they needed something to see. But today, personally, I don't need the cloud or another symbol. Hashem is everywhere.
Okay, so I would say that and you know, I want to say thank you for that, because it does relay, I think, a tremendous difficulty, that the human imagination is very visual, okay, and that part of the flaw in idolatry is trying to condense around, and that we could even have, you know, in our imagination, a kind of picture, an image of something that we so want to reproduce. But you're saying what I think many modern people would agree with is that, you know, I'm okay with not being able to see God. I'm okay with the invisibility of it. I'm okay with not even having a cloud. I'm okay with not even thinking about light or any kind of other imagery. It's just, it's hard to talk a theological language without, you know, images, without the pictures. But this struggle, I think, is already in the text itself. Bnei Yisrael, you know, we're constantly having to deal with this, because it's just part of that world where I need to see it. You know, Moses is dealing with these problems right at the beginning, which is, how are they going to believe me? How are they going to know what I'm saying? If I got to show them, so I got to show them, you know, some tricks in order for them to believe me, right? And prove to them, okay? And that spellbinding, and that, I think, you know, solidifies it. But we all know, all of us, that it's not, you can't rely on that. And deep inside the understanding that the Torah is trying to convey, the Torah really is trying to convey the same thing. Nanette, go ahead. And Marlene.
So to me, this whole situation indicates what a sociological piece of literature the Bible is. To me, the smoke indicates just how intimate the relationship between God and the people are, because, and also Moses, because just a few parshas ago, wasn't Moses and God fighting? I mean, Moses is ready to throw the towel in, but now they're like bosom friends. So now,
Exactly. Yeah.
God is indicating to him and the people, hey, you know, we have a relationship. I'm in your life, you know, with the cloud, whatever. I'm in your life. And you know what? Honestly, to this day, it indicates how important the sanctuary, the temple is, because whatever we do in our lives, we all meet there once a week.
Very nice.
Whatever.
Very nice. Okay, Marlene, then Eva.
So they fell off the scale before, and they built a golden calf because they didn't have anything that they could touch or see or relate to. And now they've got something that they can relate to that's so
Thick, and so it's so beyond relating.
so then don't they have to be weaned off of this as well?
Well, this is the question, which is, you know, to what extent will they be weaned off? And I want to hold that for a second, because I think something happens later on in the whole biblical experience. But we'll get to Eva in a second, and then we'll get to my conclusion. Go ahead, Eva.
Oh, yeah, it's along the same lines that is it correct to interpret the Mishkan as Moses and the people's attempt to preserve the experience of Sinai and to take with them wherever they go?
That's correct, and that I think is one of the storylines here, which is that the Mishkan becomes a portable Sinai, and you know, what you want to bring around as a symbol is going to be a symbol, but it's never going to be the exact same thing. And that's where I'm right between the singular, unique moment of Sinai and, the reproduction, right? I have photographs in my office and pictures. I'll know, I have a beautiful picture of the city of Ottawa, and I know it's a photo, and it takes me there, but it's not there. Go ahead, Bob.
I wonder if you could scroll back to the very top of the
Yeah,
presentation, because I wanted to share another perspective on this that comes out to me at the very beginning.
sure.
There's a lot of time spent talking about the enclosures
Yes,
and about the screens. And you often talk about walls and barriers and
indeed,
limitations.
indeed.
And the whole beginning of this parsha spends the time talking about, do we construct the furniture? Do we construct the outer parts of the Mishkan? And it seems to be returning to this same discussion about barriers here. And so to what degree does a cloud, whether it's a physical cloud or a spiritual cloud, also represent a type of barrier for people? And all the discussions, rather than looking at the cloud itself, it's what's our relationship to the cloud? Can we enter or not enter? Is that a barrier or not a barrier? And I'm just wondering your thoughts on that whole question.
I think that tension, it underlies the whole experience, because on the one hand, we have a cloud that comes out, and Moses has gone into the cloud. We saw that he went into the cloud back in chapter 24, and then after this in the when he gets the second set of tablets, he goes into the cloud. But here he's outside, and here the cloud clearly is a barrier to him. And without going too deeply, for me, the most accessible, I'm going to just stop here. The most accessible way of explaining this is that even for Moses, there's a barrier. Even Moses can't enter it, which tells me that there's an impenetrability to the divine experience for everybody. If a Moses can't get in there, then nobody can get in there. Okay, and that may be the story here. Let me quickly move to the other place where this happens here. I'm sorry, back to where it was. And the covenant ceremony we did, and second tablets, golden calf, and then fast forward to Kings 8, okay, where Solomon constructs the temple. All right, when Solomon constructs the temple, we got a lot of echoes here, but pay attention really closely to what is said and what is not said. Okay, so here's the great moment. I love this text because it's just it's a moment of achievement, but there's so many things missing here. Meanwhile, King Solomon and the entire community of Israel were present with him before the coffer, the Aron, were offering sacrifice of sheep and oxen, which could not be numbered or measured in abundance. The priest brought the coffer of God's covenant into its place, Aron Brit Adonai El Mekomo, to the rear chamber of the house, El Devir Habayit, El Kodesh HaKodeshim, El Tachat Kanfei HaKruvim. So, I didn't get a picture of this, but you have this magnificent structure where there's, sphinxes, winged creatures, and the tent and the Holy of Holies is there, and it's waiting to receive the ark. For the sphinxes were spreading their wings to the place of the coffer, so that the sphinxes were sheltering the coffer and its poles from above. And the poles were so long that the heads of the poles could be seen from the holy place in front of the rear chamber, but could not be seen outside. They have been there until this day. So whoever's telling us is saying, you can see this if you go there now, if you go to the temple now. He's writing in real time. There's nothing in the car. And then it's amazing. There's nothing. En baron rak shnei luchot ha'avanim. The 2 stone tablets that Moses had put there at Horeb, they're still there. That God cut the covenant with the children of Israel. And it wasn't the priest going out from the holy place. The cloud filled the house of God. Okay. and the priests were not able to stand to attend. ולא יכלו הכהנים לעמוד לשרת מפני הענן כי מלא כבוד אדוני את בית אדוני. The glory of God filled the house of God. Okay. Well, there's a little subtle difference here. When you compare this to the original Mishkan, if I just go up quickly to that first verse, okay, which is, it says that here, ויכס הענן את אוהל מועד וכבוד אדוני מלא את המשכן. The balance of that verse tells me that there's something intense there. The way that the book of Kings tells it is that it's trying to be the same. Vayichas ha'anan, we don't get vayichas in the book of Kings. There's no vayichas. We just get v'hanan maleh. So my ear says we got an amputation going on here. The text severed off vayichas, and there's no covering anymore. And that should be obvious to us. Why? Because we're in a different historical epoch where God just doesn't do that anymore. And that idea that it's partial and not complete is one of the big themes of the Bible. This is God in the cloud. Why no covering? Why just filling? Why no parallelism? It sounds the same, but it's different. Why? And I have here the ref. The ref is Richard Elliott Friedman. I'm going to close the screen. I call him the ref. Okay. This book is called The Disappearance of God. The Disappearance of God. And he makes this point, and I've talked about it in the past, which is that the Torah, the whole Bible, has a trajectory. The trajectory is, it starts out with God's presence. There's lots and lots of God at the beginning of the Bible. And at the end of the Bible, in the end of the biblical period, very little presence of God. The book of Esther, which we're going to read in a few weeks, we make the pun, Esther Nistar, that it's hidden. And that's the point. God's name is not even mentioned in the book of Esther. Okay? Meaning that human beings have taken responsibility for their destiny. So the theme of the entire Bible is that while humanity starts out being subordinate to God, subservient, etc., and God dictating everything, by the end of the biblical period, human beings have taken full responsibility, and that means for good and for bad. They have to be responsible for their historical outcomes, period. And that God is not, it's not that God is not present, but that you can't find God in a cloud, right? And the story of the sanctuary is this story, that Sinai is a moment where God is not mediated through anything. The cloud, it's really a sleight of hand here, the way that the text does it, because there's one moment I tried to show you where it's Vayeret Adonai, that God himself comes down, and then every time else it's anan, kvarana, blah, blah, blah. There's a kind of, some kind of modification. There's only one moment where this is. And by the time we get to the book of Kings, we don't have this parallelism. We don't have this poetry. I'm reading this and I'm trying to interpret and say, we're reaching for this. We want this. We so want this. But it's telling us you're never going to have it. And the religious composition of a soul has to include this, a yearning that may never be fulfilled. This is what separates, and here's my political statement of the week. This is what separates religious spirituality from fundamentalist spirituality. The religious spirituality has an understanding that the yearning that you have for God's presence is probably never going to be fulfilled. The fundamentalist, extremist religious personality says, yeah, I know that, but I'm still going to try and do that. And you know what? By me doing that, I'm going to get it. And that is horrific and dangerous. Okay? Go ahead, John. Waiting for you.
I think the biblical writer has some criticism of Solomon.
Yes.
I think I love the part in Deuteronomy which says the king shouldn't have too many horses, the king shouldn't have too many wives. Yes. And I'm wondering if that perspective comes in, is related to what you've been saying about
absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, even that drama takes place, earlier when there's a moment in David's life where David has this, I'm finished doing my empire building. I think I'll build a temple. And the prophet comes to David and says, God doesn't need you to build a temple. We normally think of it as, David's hands are too filled with blood. And we've explained that, but there's also like, God doesn't need a temple. God can live in a shack. Okay. And that was fine enough. But Solomon has to go build something, and he builds it not necessarily for God, but he does build it for Solomon. And the fact that you have a different kind of language here means that read closely, it's not the same, right? It kind of says, look, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the grandeur, speaking for God, but you're never going to get, and this is where we kind of make a great flaw, which is God concedes to the grandeur of the temple, but God, in conceding, there's also the prophetic statement, this is not the end all. Where we make the mistake as Jews, inheritors of the temple tradition, is we've made the temple the be-all and the end-all. And that, as we all live through during these fraught days, especially in a month where the Temple Mount resumes its controversial hold over the imagination of everybody, is a problem. It's like, would that we could all say, this is not where God resides. It's holy, of course it's holy, but we can deal with the fact that it's a holy mountain where everybody can come, and it's the Messiah is not going to just land here tomorrow, kind of thing. Susie, go ahead.
So there's another difference between the early in the Torah and in Malachim. So you've got Mishkan, and with Shlomo you have Beit Hashem. It sounds like to me it sounds like a more permanent kind of structure than.
Absolutely. No, and again, these become synonyms, but they're different layers of meaning for all of them. Bob, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if there may be an in-between perspective on your political statement, between the yearning and the more fundamentalist part. And to me, it's summarized with the statement, their journeys. I think the Baal Shem Tov once talked about the journeys as being one's own wrestling as a people with midot, with character development, with other sorts of things, not only for the people, but for each person as an individual. So rather than fundamentalist, which is one extreme, and just yearning, it's about navigating with this cloud departing and arriving and departing and arriving, that we will constantly wrestle with these boundaries and with connection.
So that is a very, it's the theme that will make its way through the Torah will be the cloud leaving and departing. And that is another strategy for analyzing this text, which is, and I made a subtle distinction between the cloud that's on the mountain and the pillar cloud, because the pillar cloud will come to symbolize the cloud on the mountain, but not be the same. And yes, of course, the spiritual life is going to be the life of journeys, and which is why, another reason why the Torah itself resonates deeply within the spiritual life of us, because we are seeing within the desert journey a span of a human life, 40 years, a short human life, but probably was the typical human life not too long ago. And a person journeys through the life, and they sometimes make it, sometimes don't make it, and into the promised land. And the fact that the story ends before we make it, always means that there's something left unfinished. And that, I think, it's the useful way of framing a human life, to say, yeah, we complete our lives, but there's always more to be done. We always live our lives knowing that nothing is complete. Stanley, go ahead.
So I would just like to ask about this term, Ohel Moed.
Yes.
I keep thinking about it. Ohel is tent, yes, but it translates Moed as meeting, as tent of meeting. Now, is it a different word? Maybe it's an ayin instead of an aleph. I don't know. We talk about Moed Tov or Moedim L'Simcha. It's a word that has to do with, seems to me, with time or season or whatever.
Yes,
How do we get from that to the word meeting?
Because meeting takes place in time. That's it. It's not. It's a very complicated term, because it obviously meeting takes place in time and space, right? The tent of meeting, the meeting which takes place in a particular moment, and the meeting that takes place in a particular space. So it's the place where both happen. Moed, like Moadim, as you mentioned, well, we meet. There are pilgrimages to the sanctuary, but they're pilgrimages in time also. It's a way that the Bible expresses what is intently inexpressible, which is, where and how do you meet God? When do you meet God? When you focus a lot on the when, you miss the where. When you focus on the where, you miss the when.
I was just wondering if the word moed there has to do with time, that this is a temporary structure.
Yeah,
There
interesting.
will be a more permanent one, namely the temple, in the
Right.
future. It's just my own speculation.
Right, good. Okay.
Yeah.
God, Mishkan has that temporariness too.
Yeah.
Well,
Steve Barkov, go ahead.
yeah, I've always had that question. We have two terms. You have the Ohel Moed, and you have the Mishkan.
Yeah.
Now, were there two closures? Did we have the Mishkan, which had a wall around it, and then a tent with three parts to it? And what was the Ohel Moed?
Yeah. So I made the argument that the Ohel Moed was the intent part, the intent, the inner side of it, and the Mishkan is the complete part of it. But you could easily say, just the same way that we use, it's, what is it? It's a metonymy, that it's a word that is a specific word that still represents the whole. And this is the poetic oscillation of these terms. Ohel Moed, look, and Psalm 27 really does this the best, right? Achat sha'alti meit Adonai. One thing I ask of God, this do I, Shivti beveit Adonai, so may dwell in the house of the Lord, kol yamechai, lachsot b'noam u'levaker behechalo, and let me visit his hechal. And then ki itzbeneni b'suko, because he shelters me in his sukkah, and he does something else in his ohel, right, in his tent. Well, the tent and the sukkah and the heichal and the bayit, they're all synonyms there. And he's a magnificent poet, but what he's done there is he's saying, I'm taking out all the words. I'm putting the whole dictionary in there for you. I'm giving you different valences to this meaning, because there are sometimes I go to the temple, he's saying, and I experience it with intimacy. And then sometimes I go to the temple and I experience its grandeur. And sometimes I feel like a sukkah, and sometimes I feel like a tent, right? And I, I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I suspect that when people come to a synagogue, especially a beautiful synagogue, where there's lots and lots of grandeur and lots of architecture, if they repeatedly come there, they'll feel one way one time, and they'll feel another way another time. They'll feel transcendence. They'll feel immanence. They'll feel that when they'll put their tallis over them, and they'll feel a certain kind of enclosure, and then they'll take their tallis off and sit and look at a big space, a beautiful space, and feel grandeur. And this is the gradients of a religious experience. We feel awe in a sacred space, and we feel intimacy in a sacred space. The only thing that we are not going to feel is what Moses experienced, which is that he could talk to God face to face. Although the Hasidim, they so want that. Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was the most expressive of this instinct, that there's intimacy. I can, I talk to God like I talk to my friend. And it's, it appears in Shalom Aleichem Tevye. Tevye talks to God like he's talking to his friend. And that level of intimacy, I think, is a cultural achievement in Jewish religious spirituality. Ilana, go ahead.
Ohel Moed, the word Moed, lim'od, is to fall, not to be very stable. So Ohel Moed could be more temporary place, and Mishkan is the permanent, because Ohel Moed is sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes you are falling, then you get up. Moed is not something stable.
Nice. I like that. Well, we've come to the way beyond our end of this. You see what we can pull out of two verses? The whole story. All right. So we'll see you have everyone have a good week. Good week. We're still praying for the Chatufim, the hostages, 157 days. People, we have a good week and think good thoughts, comfort, and thank you for being here. See you soon.
Chodesh Tov.
Thank you.
Bye.